Welcome to The Real Build. I'm your host, Jamila. I've got my co-host with me today, Andrei. Thanks for coming.
Hello. Thanks for having me yet again.
You're gonna be here every time. We need to get you a new intro.
Yeah, we do. We definitely do.
Oh, well, thanks for listening out there. We had this great show last week, and we had an amazing guest, Dan Weiner from Small Housing BC. Mm-hmm. I think we talked more off air as much as we did on
whole
air.
Episode off air, basically.
And I don't even know if we let Andrei speak last week.
You guys are going at it. Two extroverts going at it. That was fine.
So we decided that we wanted to talk more about this topic today, get deeper into kind of what Small Housing BC is, why there's government funding going towards this, and really it all wraps around infill housing, which we have talked about in previous episodes on the show, and maybe answer some questions on why we keep talking about this topic as well.
Yeah,
right?
We'll get into that.
So, Dan, if you're listening, thank you so much for coming out. Again, they have their Small Housing Symposium, which is a great thing to be a part of if you're in the industry and you want to know what's going on in infill development and infill housing.
That was the 25th, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Small Housing BC is a government-funded organization started in 2012. And one of the first ones to start, really, in the research of how are we going to, as a province, build infill housing.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's all based off of the numbers and the idea that, you know, we do have a demand to meet. And currently with the trajectory that we have for new builds and new doors coming online, we're not going to meet those targets.
Yes. So the housing crisis that we have, and Dan touched on that, the amount of housing starts that we had in BC last year, we actually have to do double every year, double number than that every year for until 2030.
Yeah. I think
in order to meet the housing
10 years
demand for the population growth of BC. This is a lot, and the government has seen this coming. This is not new. They're taking the birth rate numbers. They're taking the immigration numbers, and also the provincial movement, the provincial immigration that goes on, and they're forecasting. And they do this all the time. It's how cities decide where they're going to invest in new roads and sewer and water, because they have to track where people are going and how many people are coming. However, they may have been a little flat-footed because here we are behind the eight ball.
Yeah, and I think a big part of the whole population growth that we've seen, I think in BC especially, it happened during COVID. Like here in Kelowna, right, we had around 10% growth of the city and surrounding cities within a year.
Yeah.
And I mean, every city kind of creates an OCP, and we've talked about OCPs in the past, and they rely on those population trajectories in order to, you know, plan what the city is going to look like. And our OCP for Kelowna is set for 2040. So they say, okay, by 2040, we want the city to kind of look like this. It's going to have roughly this many people. Well, we're sitting here in 2025, and we are just about halfway to the 2040 population numbers.
Right.
And that was done in 5 years, not the 20 that they were expecting. So we've had rapid growth of population, I think, across BC, but especially in Kelowna. And so it's kind of throwing some of those numbers off.
Right. And I guess that explains why what I said being flat-footed is the experience of COVID. No matter what experience you had, everyone had very different experiences, created new patterns, new priorities, new ways of working, new ways of shopping, new priorities on where spending goes, priorities on who you spend your time with. So much things shift. So it'd be fair to say that community plans made and OCP, official community plans, made prior to this
Yep.
would need to be revised.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I think so. And they do have a revision cycle, but yeah, the way it's looking right now, we are far ahead of expectations in terms of population growth and obviously behind on the creation of new dwelling units.
Now, what the government has done, provincially, in each municipality, as well as nationally, as Canada, everyone's on the same page that where they see majority of this new housing coming from is infill development. So people with single family homes on inner city lots that have servicing going to them is adding a house, adding a carriage house, adding a duplex, recreating a fourplex. In some situations, sixplex. In other situations, their single family home received an even higher densification because they might be on a main artery road and they could combine with their neighbor and do a condo building. So densification of current properties and current infrastructure happened right across Canada.
Yeah. And kind of just a little bit of insight as to why it's densification and why we're seeing a lot of this infill housing taking over this need for new dwelling units. So in order to combat urban sprawl, which is not great from an environmental standpoint, but it's also very costly to run those pipes, those sewer pipes, those water pipes out to the outskirts of every single town and continue going outward.
More so in BC than anything.
Exactly.
Alberta, not so much. You got flat land, you can run whatever you want.
There.
But when you're going through Rocky Mountains, it's tough.
It's challenging, up and down mountains and hills.
Yeah.
So that's why Kelowna made a big push and kind of limited the boundary of Kelowna, and so that's why a lot of new housing has to be within that core area or within the boundaries of Kelowna, and they're not expanding outwards. You've got places like Penticton that are geographically limited by lakes and mountains and riversides and stuff like that. Same kind of thing for Vancouver. So that's why we're seeing a lot of densification of properties that are already existing in the city rather than continuing to sprawl outwards.
And, you know, if you're living in Kelowna and you're wondering, you know, what does the downtown city look like with more densification over a long period of time? Penticton's a really good example of a miniature version of that.
Yeah.
If that's correct, because Penticton's been landlocked for a long time.
Yep.
And they have had a blanketed densification zoning for years, decades.
Yeah, decades.
And so you can drive through their suburbs, their residential areas, and you can find a single family home beside a fourplex, beside a duplex, beside another single family home, really intermixed within each other quite well. And so, if you want to kind of see what that looks like, you can take a drive down to Penticton and see that. The previous RU7 zone, it's a great area to see, where you've got single family homes converted into fourplexes. This would be a couple of city blocks from Richter to Gordon.
Just about.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, from Knox through to just past the hospital kind of area.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of the zone.
So take a drive through there, and you can see how, they've been adding density into that area for 5-6 years now.
Yeah, 7 years, I'd say.
7 years now?
7 years since the RU7 zone came out. And it's not as intrusive as people think. Like when people think of densification within residential neighborhoods, a lot of people have pushback. And Dan was kind of touching on that yesterday. But the density that's come up, I think, has been scheduled nicely and planned nicely, and it kind of just fits with the neighborhood. It doesn't look like a monstrosity right next to a tiny little house.
Yeah. And so we kind of and that's just explaining this infill and how the government is really trying to focus building in this area. Now, there's a big win for single family home lot owners. We have touched upon it, and I want to talk more about it next when we come back. What do you think, Andre? Should we?
That sounds good.
Okay, we'll
Let's
be
take a
back
break.
soon. Welcome back to The Real Build. I'm your host, Jamila, with my co-host, Andre.
Hello.
Hello. Today we are talking about infill development and small housing BC. We had Dan Weiner on last week from Small Housing BC, which is a government-funded program that is there to research and figure out how we move in the direction of infill development in BC. This is also aligned with what the Canadian government is doing and what other provinces are doing right across Canada in order to address the housing crisis and the housing shortage that we have in this country. So there are other organizations that are funded by the government across Canada. Another one is Middle. I would go and follow them on Instagram if you're interested in this area. They operate mainly out of kind of Calgary and Edmonton. They also operate out of the Okanagan here, and they have courses and contacts for consultants on how to work through these infill projects, but also another government-funded program. There's funding for the next 2 years for agencies to come up with ways to help people do these projects in their backyard or front yard or the whole yard.
Yeah. And that's an opportunity for you as landowners.
Yeah. And we might beat a dead horse with this opportunity on this show, but the one thing about business in our country is that if you can align your business with government spending, it's a win.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, you can see that. I think we were talking before we started recording, like you can see that a lot in infrastructure projects. So roadworks, developing whole new cities or roads connecting cities. That's where, typically in the past you could see companies taking down huge contracts from the government to build a road from city A to city B.
Trucking companies, concrete companies, asphalt companies, flagging companies. There's lots of variety of businesses that they need to hire in this area to create these roads. And infrastructure projects are typically how they're putting surges of money into the economy.
Exactly, yeah.
Right?
Yeah. You're hiring people that live in the area typically, and you're hiring businesses that are usually in the area, especially for trades like that. Like you need people there every day. So.
And then those people buy houses, and those people have their kids in school, and they go to the grocery store, and they go to the restaurant, and it all kind of trickles down. It's how they've built towns all across North America.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah, really, that's kind of how it is.
The Hoover Dam was a economy stimulus project for people. So when you have the ability to be in line with the objectives of the government, which are typically supposed to be the objectives of the people or solving the people's problem, which right now is housing, it's usually easier to get that thing done.
Yeah, if you're not butting heads with the regulators.
Yeah, exactly. And some great examples of that is just 4 years ago, when we were doing our applications for the condo building, there was lots of public hearings we'd have to go through. We need to connect with our neighbors and have them sign off on the information and that they're on board. You have to go through a rezoning application to get the density that you're looking for.
Yep.
And for individual single-family home lots in the middle of residential areas, carriage homes were super popular for 10, 15 years, and lots of homeowners that wanted to do them but got stopped.
Yep.
Because it just wasn't in the official community plan. It was too much density. Right up to 4 years ago, could have had the possibility that you tried to do it, and the city said, no, this isn't an area we want to see that kind of
Density.
housing in, right?
Yep.
I'm telling you right now, that is out the window.
Yeah, that's all gone.
That roadblock is gone. So if you have had a project in mind in the past, or you had a neighbor that got turned away, this is all changed along with the public hearings and going in front of council. If you're working within the new revised zoning bylaw, most of it's staff approved.
Yeah. And I mean, there's this push for less barriers to development and less barriers to creating housing. You can see it kind of from a federal level, provincial level, and then municipal. Like, there's pressure on every form of government in order to approve housing projects quicker.
And for some of you out there, this might be very upsetting. I'm not blind to the fact that people like their community to stay
The way that is, yeah.
the way it is, and that adding 5 new residents to your block means 10 more cars, means potentially 20 more people, and buildings that might be shading the garden next door. There's all these things to think about and to consider.
But that's why we have the zoning bylaw in place, which is like a well thought out document that kind of takes all of these things into account.
100%.
So there are still areas, even within Kelowna, that you're not going to be able to build 4 units, whether that's the zoning, whether that's just the size of the lot, whether that's the geography of the parcel.
Yeah.
Like, it's not necessarily gonna happen everywhere, but it's just a lot easier to go through the government processes.
Exactly. Now, if you are one of the individuals out there that owns property and thinks, I'm seeing all this stuff on Facebook and Reels and on HGTV of people creating these rental properties and generating cash flow for their families. And this is a real strategy in order to create monthly cash flow and increase your net worth. And now this door has opened up for many Canadians that own single family home properties. And then the next hurdle that we hear a lot is money, because, let's face it, if we all had $500,000 in the bank, we would be doing this already. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
But because you can take that property and essentially you're creating another lot that has value. And a key part of this is that you've owned this property for probably 10 years or more and have gone through paying it down in combined with the uplift in value. That you have a chunk of equity available, and that there's ways at the bank that they can utilize that equity in your home towards the cost of building the next
the new units. Yeah, so there's strategies around being able to unlock what you've paid down on your house or the appreciation that you've seen, and use that money that's not in your pocket but it's in your land towards the development of property, which can then lead to increased values and increased cash flow.
Now, another thing to consider with your plan with this is your age too, right? If you've got another 20 years of working like I do, I'm thinking, I could put a mortgage and put another house back there, and I've got time. And the banks are going to look at me like, you've got more working years ahead of you. This makes sense for us. If you're in retirement, you might be thinking, ooh.
You might not want to go down the whole rabbit hole.
Another mortgage. But you might be thinking of downsizing. You might be thinking of supporting grandchildren or children with housing. And this could be a way to do it, utilizing your own property, building your downsizing dream spot, and renting the house out to pay for that. And so instead of selling the house and buying, you can do that, as well as vice versa with providing housing for family members. They're telling me I got to take a break, though. We got to take a moment. We'll come back. We'll keep talking about infill development, the government's support, and the resources available to you to figure out how to do it. Welcome back to The Real Build. I'm your host, Jamila, with my co-host, Andrei.
Hello.
We are talking about a recap from our show from last week where we had Dan Weiner on from Small Housing BC. Thank you, Dan, if you're listening. What a great show. But I felt like we didn't really even get to talk about the tip of the iceberg of this and why Small Housing BC even exists. So early in the show today, we touched upon how it's a government-funded organization that is designed to research and figure out how we streamline and make building infill housing easier for the everyday person. And the reason why the government is funding this, and they're funding different organizations right across Canada in all our provinces, because they see this as one of the main solutions to the housing need that we have in Canada. And even though I know here in the Okanagan, there's lots of housing inventory for sale right now, and it may seem like I thought we had a crisis. Why aren't these houses selling? However, when we are in a bit of a pause in the market and interest rates purposely were put in place to slow us down a bit.
Yep.
However, the aftermath of slowing us down is creating another gap. And to put it in perspective, the amount of new housing starts that happened in BC last year, we need to do double that every year until 2030 to accommodate the housing need that is done by Canadian statistics of birth rates, immigration into Canada, and migration from province to province, and what province housing needs are going to be.
Yeah.
Now, does that sum it up, basically?
Yeah.
And then we also talked about how the government, because they're in line with this initiative, it has made this opportunity for single family homeowners to take advantage of this and ultimately increase their net worth, their cash flow, and provide some solutions, because the reason why this is a crisis is because, you might have kids that can't afford to buy houses.
Yeah.
And you might have elders that need a place to go. And you might be thinking of downsizing yourself.
Yeah. And I mean, we touched on, when you can align yourself with government policies, that creates the quickest path to achieve something, especially when you need the approvals of your different governing bodies. And kind of like a recap to what we've been talking about today, like we have an opportunity now as homeowners and landowners where, based on the policies and the direction that the government's going and this housing crisis, that kind of your everyday person that owns a piece of property within BC or within Canada has an opportunity to align themselves with those government policies. So it's not necessarily now just trucking companies and paving companies and, large scale companies that get to do that, but it's kind of your individual, at an individual level, you can now have more efficiency and go on with these projects.
And reap the benefits of it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people on both sides of the fence on this topic as well. We want to recognize we're pretty pro it, but we are developers and builders, and we both own rental properties, and that was the strategy for our investments.
Yep.
So we really see how this is such a benefit. We understand change in neighborhoods is tough, and that maybe it might not seem as possible or as easy as we seem to be talking.
No, it's never as easy
about
as talking about it, but yeah.
Yeah, but text us whether if you think no, I don't like this, or if you maybe have a property and you have no idea what you would do. Text us 250-862-2525. We'd love to talk about your questions on the show and help people out, because that's really what we're doing here. Is we are really want to help people tap into these opportunities and help them see how to get those started, as well as really just about any real estate investment or like home purchasing question, we are tapped into the market from a builder developer perspective and standpoint. So if you have questions, please text us 250-862-2525. Standard text rates apply. To tell me I have to say that. So what we wanted to talk about next now, and which was thing we realized with Dan when he was here last week, is that the government is moving into prefab housing.
So let's say, what is prefab? How is it different than, what people have been doing in building for the last 100 years?
Okay. So prefab's been around for
of course,
a long time as well.
It's become more popular now, so I feel like it's good to
coming back around.
Yeah,
the Buick. Somehow the Buick got popular.
I don't think the Buick's coming back around. I think the Buick's staying where it is.
Oh, if they would have just called it something different, it would be popular. Anyway, so stick frame, the industry calls stick frame building. That is when your lumber arrives on site in a bundle, and the guys pull it out piece by piece, and they nail it together on site, or they pour the concrete on site. Everything happens on site.
Yep.
Prefab is where it's made somewhere else in a factory, and then brought to site and assembled or put together. So there's prefab wall companies. This is becoming really popular, especially in condo buildings, where you send your plans, and in a warehouse they pre-build all your walls.
Yep.
And then your walls arrive, and you stand the walls up on site, and you put your floor together. We actually did this with the condo building, and
we did.
Wow, that was fast. Once we got them on site.
Yeah, they could do like a floor a week kind of thing. It was pretty impressive.
Yeah, so that's prefabrication. And then you also have prefabrication where they actually build the whole thing. The toilets are in there. The lights are hanging from the ceiling.
And that's kind of the direction that we're starting to go more and more. At least the government incentives are towards that kind of building.
What we heard from Dan was that, now we all know the government doesn't get it right every time, but what we heard from Dan was that the government is listening to the public, and time is something that they're saying holds people back from doing these projects, and prefab saves you time.
And so I wonder if that whole time argument is because money. Well, not necessarily money, but it's because they see that building and development is so behind that maybe that's a direction that they're willing to take because it saves time on creating these completed units.
Yes.
Just a theory, but...
Yeah, that's interesting because they need so many units. We need to speed up construction.
Yeah.
Also, the intrusiveness in the community, a year of having someone build a house in your backyard to your neighbors and yourself can be annoying.
It could be annoying. After about 6 months, though, you don't really notice it. Most of the stuff's inside. Yeah, most of the stuff's inside.
Yeah. So why isn't it, like we're saying, okay, it's faster, comes done. Why aren't people doing it right now? Well, it's price, right?
Right now, yeah. Right now, it is objectively just more expensive to do it that way than to stick frame it and do it on site. Yeah.
And it's not like a huge difference.
No.
But it does cost a bit more. And numbers are tight in construction in BC and in Kelowna. Your cost to labor, cost to materials. You are really watching every penny to make sure projects go smoothly and are profitable. Someone's got to make a little bit of money at the end. So,
I don't think there's anybody right now in Kelowna doing new development that's making hand over fist profit. I just don't. No. It's not the climate for that right now.
Being a developer is a job. You have to keep going and keep doing it, and it's risky. And there is the jobs that do pay off, but most of the time you're earning a living, and a good living, like everyone else, being a developer. So, prefab saves you time, but it costs a little bit more. And the government is trying to create processes and bring those costs down. So it is the way we kind of move forward. We're going to talk more about that next. Stay tuned. Welcome back to The Real Build. I'm your host, Jamila. I've got my co-host, Andrei, here with me today.
Hello.
We are talking about small housing BC, and just a follow-up to our interview with Dan Weiner last week. Dan, thank you for coming. We had so much to talk about because they are a government-funded agency in place to help get the country, and BC specifically, to start building infill projects. And that's laneway houses, carriage houses, and redeveloping your property. We talked about why there's such an advantage for single family homeowners right now to be aligned with the provincial, federal, and municipal objectives in creating housing. So it's probably the easiest path through the red tape to get your dreams done.
It's been it's the easiest it's been in a long time.
A long time. And it's new. It's new easy. So 4 years ago, if your neighbor tried to do it and got shut down, it's different now. It probably is a go. Depending if your neighbor is trying to build a spaceship or something like that.
I would love to see that.
Right?
Yeah.
No rocket fuel.
Yeah.
But all jokes aside, infill development, we've referred to it as upcycling infrastructure, upcycling existing land within the community.
They've got a creative name for it called gentle density.
The missing middle.
The missing middle.
Yeah, there's lots of terms for this stuff.
Yeah.
Our term is increase net worth.
Yeah.
Increase monthly cash flow.
Facts and numbers.
Build your real estate portfolio in your backyard. We also want you to text in your questions. Maybe you've got a property, you've been thinking about doing something, and you want us to run an analysis on it. Text in. Or you think, no, there is no housing crisis. This doesn't need to happen. I don't want it in my neighborhood. Tell us that too. 250-862-2525. Standard text rates do apply. Now, before the break, we were talking about another initiative that Dan was talking about that they're putting research funding into, is how prefab housing enters into this market. And we wanted to come back and talk about that because there's some challenges there that is not as easy on paper. And this is where it gets tricky when you have government and municipalities doing things because it looks good on paper, but then the actual implementation in the field can be challenging.
Yeah.
And we touched upon price.
Cost and time, yeah. Advantage prefab is time.
Faster.
Yeah, faster. Con is price.
It costs a bit more.
And customization if you want to go down that path, because you are going to get a prefabricated kind of set building,
right?
That you can't do too many things to, but you still have a bit of room.
Is also designed within the parameters to ship.
Yes.
Right?
That's important as well.
But the trend in container housing has made that less as a con and more of a pro.
And just to touch on container housing, I think container houses are really, really cool.
Yeah.
And you can do some absolutely amazing things with container houses. Those are kind of in a ballpark of their own, like the actual metal container houses that you see on Instagram or YouTube or whatever.
I would consider those the prefab category as well.
Yeah.
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 There's a really cool company out of Alberta called Honomobo.
Yes.
That
they do amazing work.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Container housing.
Those are kind of in a field of their own in terms of pricing too, because you're dealing with, different trade. You're going to have a lot more welding than you do framers, and there's some nuances to it. But those are really cool projects.
And those also do cost a bit more.
Yep.
Now they say they want to create ways to bring down the cost of prefab housing. So not only is it cheaper, it's faster, and
that's the goal.
It's the way to go. So I know my stick frame builders out there that are listening to me right now are going, "There's no way!" But when government starts putting money behind things, they start finding solutions. The one thing I can't wrap my head around is that to make it cheaper, it means the same thing, rinse and repeat over and over and over again, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know. Again, in Alberta, flat. same lot cut for acres and acres and acres. I can see how you can rinse and repeat. But in BC, even a flat lot is not flat.
Yeah.
Your eyes can look at a flat lot, and there's 4 feet difference between front to back that needs to be accounted for.
And I mean, that's a good case scenario. There's properties and lots with massive grade changes or odd shapes, your trapezoid style lots that we have so many of here.
That's why we're the king of the walkouts.
Yeah. I mean, I think the challenge that we were kind of both talking about and both seeing is we have a trouble seeing how these efficiencies of scale are going to come into effect when potentially so much customization and so many different dimensions are required when doing an infill.
Now, and a great example is this last round of infill development with the RU7 section where the city did fast track plans. I think that was executed brilliantly.
Very well.
The plans, there was 2 different sets of plans, one very economical, one a little bit more dressed up. They both got built like crazy. You got to skip a year of planning and designing if you bought these plans.
Yep.
People were able to enter into a hot market, build a product, sell it, rent it.
I mean, it was $5,000 for a set of plans. Like, that is unbeatable. Really,
I don't know if that would be the same price today.
Oh yeah, fair enough. 2019 numbers.
Yeah.
It was amazing the way that they rolled that out.
Yeah, it was very, very good. But even so, you'd say, listen, they did that. If you prefab that building, you could just plunk, rinse, and repeat. No, what made that successful is that they had a 3-meter variance in the building, right? Was that correct? 3 meter variance in the building, which means you could stretch the building up to 3 meters and still get through the fast track plan.
Yeah.
Because even in the RU7 zone, which looks very similar, from street to street, there was, 3 to 5 meter difference in depth. There was difference in widths in lot properties, and it just isn't a one size fits all. So there definitely is a happy medium in consistent design that can be varied upon.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the challenges I really see, and it comes from people that we've talked to that want to pursue projects like this. We look at somebody's backyard that they want to add 2 or 3 units to, and we have to kind of configure the new units in such a way that kind of complements the space that they have, so that it's not just a building right in front of their window that has a lake view, or it has to deal with this berm and this slope of this grade change that we're seeing. And so because there's such a focus on infill, I just feel like these customizations, these differing dimensions, these complementary plans that fit the buildings that are already there, that might create issues with this prefab idea.
Well, and that's a really good point, because we're really boots on the ground. I have been going out and talking to landowners for a decade now on options they can do with their land to develop, whether that be a carriage home or a condo building. And I really think most of this housing is going to come from adding on and having the existing structure still be in place.
Yeah. I mean, if you've got a house from the 80s or the 90s and that you've recently remodeled, or you've done the bathrooms in, or you've, knocked down a couple walls and made it really nice place to live, like, it'd be kind of a shame to knock that down. And I don't think a lot of people would take the approach of knocking down their existing home. So even investors who are cash flowing from that property, I don't think they're going to knock it out and lose that side of the income just so that they can build something new that's going to rent the same.
Yeah, the house would have to be pretty run down.
Exactly.
And our neighborhoods are too new to have a lot of that. We kind of got rid of it in the RU7 zone. That's where the old warehouses were, right?
Exactly.
So that if you're knocking down the house and you have these lots and you have this pre-designed plan and you can prefab it in factory and it pops out the same and in a whole bunch of lots in a row, I can see how that can work. But adding to the backyard. Now, I'm sure there are prefab manufacturers out there that work
Oh, yeah.
in the industry or own, like SRI Homes, you listening? Give us a call. We need to have you guys on and talk more about this, because this is a trend and where the government wants housing to go. And so maybe there's something we're missing here, because we are stick frame builders. So let's see if we can get a prefab guy.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we got to wrap it up today, but if you have any questions, comments, you can text them to 250-862-2525. Standard rate supply. That is Andrei and Jamila on The Real Build.
That's pretty good.
Send us your questions.
Bye-bye.
We'll talk to you next week.